The streets of Easton, Maryland, stretched out before her like a quiet promise. It was one of those spring evenings where the air carried just a hint of warmth, a gentle preview of the summer to come. Street lamps flickered to life along the tree-lined avenues, casting soft golden pools of light onto the clean sidewalks. Everything about this town whispered suburban serenity. White picket fences, well-tended lawns, and the rhythmic hum of a community winding down. Behind the wheel of her black Range Rover, Dr. Amina Rhodes, a black woman and the FBI Deputy Director of the Cyber Division, allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She eased into the leather seat, her fingers loose on the steering wheel, the soft sounds of Miles Davis weaving through the speakers. The smooth trumpet tones were like a balm against the relentless pace of her workday. Meetings with congressional oversight committees, high-level threat assessments, and cybersecurity briefings that could have national repercussions. Tonight, though, there were no crises chasing her down the Beltway. No urgent calls lighting up her government-issued phone. For once, the world could wait. All that lay ahead was her modest townhome, a leftover lasagna in the fridge, and a half-finished true crime podcast she promised herself she'd finish before Monday came crashing back. The dashboard clock glowed softly. 8:46 p.m., 10 more minutes, and she'd be home. Amina glanced briefly into her rearview mirror, a habit so ingrained it felt like breathing. Not out of paranoia. At least, that's what she told herself. But experience. Navigating life as a black woman in America, even one carrying the weighty title of FBI Deputy Director, meant that vigilance was never optional. Her credentials might open doors at the Pentagon, but on a lonely stretch of suburban road, they were invisible. She signaled her right turn long before reaching the corner, slowing to exactly the speed limit. The car purred as she guided it effortlessly onto Elmwood Drive, the familiar street that wound past cookie-cutter homes and perfectly pruned hedges. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, lulled by the predictability of it all. And then the flashing lights came. Red and blue burst into her rear-view mirror, flooding the inside of her car with a harsh, strobe-like glow. The trumpet solo dissolved into static as her heartbeat quickened, thudding against her ribs with alarming force. Instinct took over before fear could. Amina clicked on her hazard lights, signaling her compliance. She steered her SUV smoothly onto gravel shoulder, the crunch under her tires sounding too loud in the otherwise hushed night. She killed the engine, rolled down her window halfway, and, crucially, flipped on the interior dome light. Let them see your hands. Let them see your no threat. Her fingers, steady but deliberate, came to rest visibly atop the steering wheel. It didn't matter that she was a black woman who held one of the highest positions in federal law enforcement. It didn't matter that her work protected millions of Americans from unseen cyber threats every single day. Out here, in the middle of Easton's sleeping streets, none of that armored her against the assumptions of white cops who saw only the color of her skin and the make of her car. Amina inhaled slowly, deeply. She didn't let herself look in the mirror. She didn't want to see what expression might be etched across her face. Anger, fear, exhaustion. She just sat, composed, a portrait of calm that cost her a lifetime to master. The approaching footsteps crunch against the gravel, slow and heavy. She could feel the presence before she saw him. A broad-shouldered figure backlit by the flashing cruiser lights, a flashlight cutting a sharp line through the darkness. As he drew closer, the beam slashed across her face, lingering too long, too deliberately. She caught a glimpse of his badge, Officer Braden Cole. Young, white, aggressive stance. That alone told her everything she needed to know about how this encounter was going to unfold. Tap, tap, tap. His knuckles rapped sharply against her window. Amina pressed the button to lower the glass a few inches, keeping her posture upright, her voice level. "Good evening, officer," she said, her tone firm but respectful. "Is there a problem?" Officer Cole didn't answer immediately. Instead, he shone the flashlight directly into her eyes, forcing her to squint. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared slightly, like he was already primed for a fight. "License and registration," he barked. No greeting, no explanation. Amina's grip on the wheel tightened imperceptibly. She knew the script, the unwritten rules that govern moments like these. Keep calm, keep visible, Speak clearly. Never give them an excuse. I'd be happy to provide that, she replied, her voice smooth as river stone. But could you first tell me the reason for the stop? The air between them stretched taut. The flashlight wavered slightly before fixing back on her hands. Your car caught my eye, Officer Cole said, his tone oozing the casual arrogance of unchecked authority. Just making sure everything's in order. Caught his eye. Amina bit the inside of her cheek to keep her face neutral. I was driving 30 miles per hour. I signaled at every turn, she said. May I ask again, what law did I violate? Officer Cole shifted his weight, his hand tightening around the flashlight handle. His posture grew stiffer, defensive. I don't need a reason to run your papers, he snapped. Now hand them over. For a moment, Amina considered complying immediately, ending this as quickly and safely as possible. But something deep inside her rebelled. A quiet, burning refusal to let him reduce her to just another frightened black woman in the night. She leaned ever so slightly toward the open window, her voice dropping into a lower, unshakable register. Officer Cole, she said, her gaze locked unwaveringly onto his. I'm requesting that you state a lawful reason for the stop, as required under Maryland law. The gravel under his boots shifted as he stepped closer. His face darkened, shadowed in the halo of flashing lights behind him. You don't tell me how to do my job, he sneered, his voice sharp and ugly. You and your fancy car. You're out of place here. That's reason enough. Out of place. The words sliced through Amina harder than any curse. They weren't about her speed or her turn signal. They were about her presence. Her very existence. She could feel the knot of anger tighten in her chest, but she didn't let it show. Not yet. Instead, she kept her hands visible on the wheel, her posture unyielding, her voice cool and clear. I live here, she said simply. 10 minutes from this spot. Officer Cole's mouth twisted into a smirk. Well, he said, stepping back just slightly, hands still resting casually near his belt. You're not home yet. The implication, sharp as a blade, hung between them. And in that moment, under the sickly wash of cruiser lights and crackling radios, Dr. Amina Rhodes understood. This wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a test of survival. And she had no intention of failing it. The soft hum of the night was shattered by the relentless flicker of red and blue lights. Amina's world, a moment ago so neatly ordered inside her car, now pulsed under the urgent commands of flashing beacons. The music had long since faded to a forgotten murmur. The only sound now was the insistent thud of her heartbeat hammering against her ribs. The white cop's cruiser remained parked a few feet behind her, its headlights scorching the darkness, bathing her SUV in an unrelenting glare. Every instinct screamed at her to stay composed. Every lesson passed down from her parents, from every civil rights elder, from her own training at the FBI. Stay visible. Stay alive. Dr. Amina Rhodes sat with her palms still planted firmly on the steering wheel. Her posture, disciplined from years of authority and survival, was the only armor she had now. It didn't matter that she was the FBI deputy director. It didn't matter that she'd testified before Congress or briefed national security advisors. In the rear-view mirror, all that mattered to the white cop's closing and was that she was a black woman behind the wheel of a luxury car. At night, in a neighborhood they clearly believed she didn't belong. She tilted her mirror slightly, catching sight of the approaching figure. Officer Braden Cole. His stride was cocky, almost leisurely, but there was a coiled energy about him, a readiness for confrontation rather than courtesy. His hand casually rested on the butt of his weapon, fingers tapping against the holster like a silent metronome counting down. Amina's breathing slowed by force of will. One mistake, one twitch, and this night could end differently. Permanently. She caught herself thinking about statistics she'd long memorized during civil rights briefings. Unarmed black drivers were 3 times more likely to be subjected to force during traffic stops, 50% more likely to be searched without cause, and black women, were not exempt. She inhaled through her nose, slow and steady. She was not just another driver. She was a symbol tonight. Even if Officer Cole didn't know it yet. The gravel crunched louder. The flashlight beam wavered. then shot directly into her face once again. "License and registration," Officer Cole barked, his voice cutting through the night air with the authority of someone who'd never truly been questioned. Amina resisted the urge to flinch. She knew better. She had trained young agents to remain poised under pressure, to control not just their actions but their very expressions. Her life might depend on it now. "Good evening, officer," she said again, her voice a controlled melody of politeness and steel. "Can you please tell me why I was pulled over?" The question wasn't just formality. It was legal right. Maryland law demanded officers state a reason for stops unless there was an imminent threat. But the look on Officer Cole's face made it clear he wasn't interested in protocol. His flashlight wavered, then settled back to her hands, still motionless on the wheel. "Your car caught my eye," he said, shrugging like the weight of the night meant nothing to him. "Nice ride for this neighborhood." Amina felt the burn of those words deep in her chest. "Nice ride for this neighborhood." Translation: "Too nice for you." Translation: "You don't belong here, black woman." "I live 10 minutes from here," she said evenly. "I drive this road every day." But he wasn't listening. He wasn't interested in her words. To white cops like Cole, the very presence of a black woman in a Range Rover at night was an anomaly. Suspicious by default, his jaw tightened. His body language shifted. The space between them becoming a taut wire stretched thinner with every second she didn't cower, didn't comply instantly. "License and registration," he repeated, sharper now, more forceful. Amina's mind raced. Compliance could save her life. Defiance could cost it. But blind submission was not survival. It was erasure. "I'm happy to comply," she said carefully. "But per Maryland law, I respectfully ask you to articulate the reason for the stop first." There was a perfectly lawful request, and yet the white cop's face hardened. "You don't get to make demands," Officer Cole sneered. His hand hovered closer to his holster now. "Out here, I decide what's lawful." The lie hung in the air between them like the static of a brewing storm. Out of the corner of her eye, Amina saw a second cruiser pull up behind the first, its lights joining the frantic, strobing symphony already splitting the night. Another white cop stepping out, hands at his belt, sizing up the scene. Two now, two armed men, primed for escalation. And still no reason given. No crime committed. Only her black skin, her nice car, her unwillingness to be small. She shifted slowly, carefully, reaching with visible hands toward her glove compartment. She retrieved her license and registration, holding them up for him to see, but not handing them over just yet. "I'm Dr. Amina Rhodes," she said, voice level, "Deputy Director of the FBI Cyber Division." The words didn't register, or rather, they bounced off Officer Cole like rain against stone. His eyes narrowed, dismissive. "Don't care what you are," he spat. "Out here, you're whoever I say you are." The flashlight clicked off. The gun remained untouched for now, but the threat was palpable, thrumming in the humid air between them. The second officer hung back near the cruiser, watching, waiting, a silent reinforcement for whatever decision Cole made next. Amina gripped the steering wheel tighter, the worn leather biting into her palms. Not fear, not yet, but anger, a deep, roiling anger, burned behind her composed exterior. She had faced cybercriminals capable of collapsing entire infrastructures. She had negotiated with foreign intelligence officers known for psychological warfare. And yet here, on the quiet streets of Easton, Maryland, she was forced to plead for the right to be seen as human. The world outside her window blurred into noise. The chirr of crickets, the faint hum of traffic far off, the grinding whine of her own breath drawn slow and careful. Officer Cole leaned closer. "You're going to step out of the car," he growled, "or things are going to get real bad for you." For the first time, a shiver of fear slithered down her spine. Not because she didn't know her rights, but because she knew all too well how little rights mattered when a gun was drawn and a mind was already made up. She set her jaw. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper of iron. "I will not step out of this vehicle without lawful cause." The standoff had begun, and in the flashing lights of the rear view, Amina Rhodes understood. Tonight, survival would not be about rank or title. It would be about Will, and she would not bend. The air between them thickened, dense with silent threats and invisible history. Officer Braden Cole stood outside the open window of Amina Rhodes' SUV, the heavy beam of his flashlight still slicing across her face. Every flicker of light, every movement of his hand near his belt, broadcasted a message louder than words. He saw her not as a citizen, not as a professional, but as a problem to control. The thin veneer of civility that sometimes coated interactions with white cops had already cracked wide open. This was no routine traffic stop. This was a confrontation, naked and raw. Officer Cole, young, white, and radiating an entitled confidence that decades of unchecked authority had forged, shifted his stance. His boots crunched against the gravel with deliberate weight, a predator pacing, probing. His jaw was tight, his breathing shallow, the telltale signs of someone itching to escalate. "You think you're special because you work for the FBI, huh?" he sneered, spinning the words like a challenge. Amina, the black woman behind the wheel, kept her eyes forward, her hands visible, her voice measured. "I expect to be treated like any citizen under the law, officer," she said. "Nothing more, nothing less." But her calm was a language Officer Cole refused to understand. "You people always think you're above the rules," he muttered. Too loud to be a private thought. Too point to be anything but an accusation. His eyes flicked across her face, lingering longer than necessary, as if daring her to react. "You people..." The phrase hit harder than the flashing lights burning behind him. Amina stayed still, the interior light casting a soft glow on her open palms. She could feel the insult slithering over her skin, could feel the thick, bitter history pressing against her chest. The generations of black women who had been belittled, humiliated, threatened by the very people sworn to protect them. But she didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, she met his gaze squarely and asked again, "On what grounds do you order me out of my vehicle?" The muscles along Officer Cole's neck twitched. His hand drifted dangerously close to his holster again, and the air between them sparked with unspoken danger. "You're not answering my questions," he said sharply. "You're being difficult. That's reason enough. Reason enough to pull her over. Reason enough to order her out. Reason enough, if he decided, to do worse." The other white cop lingered by the patrol car, silent backup. His presence a reminder that this wasn't a negotiation. This was a powder keg. Amina could feel the stares from the surrounding darkened homes. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Curious neighbors drawn to the sirens and flashing lights. Some watched through blinds. Others stood openly on their lawns, arms crossed, faces unreadable. Would they step forward if things turned violent? Would they pull out their phones? Or would they vanish into the safety of plausible deniability? Amina didn't have time to wonder. Officer Cole's patience, whatever fragile thread had held it, finally snapped. "Step out! Now!" he barked, slamming his palm against the side of her door hard enough to make the vehicle rock. The bang echoed like a gunshot down the quiet street. The black woman inside the car felt the tremor ripple through her body, a primal jolt of fear, buried so deep she barely registered it. But she forced herself to stay still, not because she trusted him, not because she thought he would show restraint, but because she knew her stillness was her armor. Any sudden movement could be twisted into justification. Any flash of emotion could be reinterpreted as aggression. And so Amina breathed, slowly, carefully. "I have done nothing wrong," she said again, her voice a quiet shield. "I have a right to remain inside my vehicle, unless you can articulate probable cause." Officer Cole's lips twisted into a grimace of disgust. "You think your fancy FBI badge scares me?" he said, stepping even closer. "Out here, that badge don't mean a damn thing. Out here, I'm the law." And in that sentence, the truth stood naked between them. This wasn't about law. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. About reminding a black woman, even one who was the FBI deputy director, that her life could still be held in the trembling hands of a white cop with a grudge and a gun. Amina's mind raced, weighing her next move. Compliance could still end badly. Resistance could be fatal. But there was a third option. Document everything. Slowly, painfully deliberately, she moved her right hand, open and visible, toward the dashboard mount. Her thumb brushed the screen of her phone. A soft chime sounded as the recording app activated. A blinking red light appeared, small but defiant. The white cop saw it instantly. "You think a damn video's gonna save you?" Officer Cole spat, the veins in his neck standing out. "No," Amina said, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. "It's going to save the truth." For a moment, time stretched thin, a high wire act balance on breath and willpower. The night around them seemed to hold its breath too. Officer Cole stared at her, breathing hard, fury and uncertainty worn across his face. His hand hovered once more near the gun at his hip. "You're going to regret this," he muttered, the words thick with promise. Amina lifted her chin slightly. "No," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "You are." And somewhere, beneath the fear and rage, beneath the history and heartbreak, a spark of resolve ignited. No matter how this ended, Dr. Amina Rhodes, black woman, FBI deputy director, survivor, would not let tonight be the story they tried to write for her. She would write her own. The night had deepened, cloaking Elmwood Drive in heavier shadows. But under the relentless strobe of flashing lights, nothing could hide anymore. Every word, every move between Dr. Amina Rhodes and the white cops was exposed, laid bare under the scrutiny of the small blinking red light, recording the encounter. Amina stayed frozen behind the wheel, both hands still displayed openly, glowing under the pale interior light of her SUV. She knew the white cops were waiting for her to flinch, to crack, to give them a reason, but she wouldn't. Officer Braden Cole loomed closer now, the anger vibrating off him in waves. His fingers twitched near the butt of his service weapon, a silent threat hovering in the humid spring air. "You think that little badge you keep talking about matters out here?" he sneered. "You're just another mouthy driver who doesn't know when to listen." His flashlight swept once more across her face, an unnecessary gesture that felt more like a challenge in protocol. Amina kept her voice low but clear, every syllable carved from steel. "Officer Cole," she said, addressing him formally, refusing to let emotion hijack her tone. "I've asked you respectfully, twice, for the lawful reason behind this stop. You have yet to provide one." The second white cop, Officer Davis, silent until now, shifted his weight uneasily by the patrol car. His hand rested casually on his belt, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. He wasn't ready to intervene, not yet, but he was watching, calculating. Officer Cole, however, wasn't in a mood to be questioned, especially not by a black woman whose calm defiance made him look powerless. "You don't get to demand anything," he barked, stepping so close that the brim of his hat almost grazed the top of her window. His breath fogged against the glass. "This is my stop," he continued, his voice rising with every word. "And if I say step out of the vehicle, you step out. End of story." Amina's jaw tightened. She thought of all the years she had spent serving her country, climbing through a system not built for women like her. Thought of the countless rooms she'd entered where her intelligence had been doubted before she even opened her mouth. Thought of the burden she carried. Not just her own safety, but the silent weight of every black woman who had ever been told they were out of place. Her fingers tightened against the steering wheel. Not enough to appear hostile, just enough to ground herself. "I will comply with any lawful order," she said evenly, "but you have not given me one." A muscle in Officer Cole's jaw jumped. He leaned even closer, lowering his voice into a near growl. "Lawful? You want lawful? Fine." He took a deliberate step back and unclipped the snap of his holster. The sound, a tiny click, reverberated through Amina's bones like a gunshot. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing even, her posture still. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. "You are being detained for suspicious activity," he said, voice dripping with false authority. "And I am ordering you out of the car." Suspicious activity. The most elastic, meaningless justification in the handbook. Her mind raced, parsing every possible response. She had the law on her side. But law had never been armor enough against prejudice backed by a gun. The flashlight swung wildly as Cole gestured aggressively toward the door. "I'm not going to tell you again," he growled. "Step out, now." Amina glanced at her phone, still recording. The blinking red light was small, but it was her only witness. "Officer Cole," she said carefully, her voice unwavering. "I am recording this interaction for my safety and for yours. I am requesting that a supervisor be called to the scene before I exit my vehicle." Officer Cole's nostrils flared. His fingers twitched again, and for one terrifying moment, Amina thought he might reach for his weapon. Right there, right now. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he let out a harsh laugh, bitter and cruel. "You really think backup's gonna help you?" he said, sneering. "You really think your little badge is gonna change how this goes?" Amina's pulse pounded in her ears. She didn't respond. She didn't move. The second white cop, Officer Davis, shifted again. Unease radiated off him now like heat from a summer sidewalk. He wasn't part of Cole's plan, whatever that plan was. But he wasn't stepping in either. The street had gone eerily quiet. Even the crickets seemed to have fallen silent, as if the entire world were holding its breath. Officer Cole smirked, mistaking her silence for surrender. "You people think you're untouchable," he said, voice low and vicious. "But out here you're just another mouth I can shut." Amina lifted her chin slightly, her voice slicing through the heavy night. "I am Dr. Amina Rhodes," she said, "Deputy Director of the FBI Cyber Division." The words rang like a bell in the humid darkness. For the first time, real hesitation flickered across Officer Cole's face. His smirk faltered. He hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected her to be someone who could not just survive the stop, but destroy his career with a single call. For a beat, everything hung suspended. The flashing lights, the distant hum of engines, the tension so thick it felt tangible. Officer Davis shifted again, this time with a visible ripple of nervous energy. Cole recovered quickly. Too quickly. "You think throwing titles around means anything to me?" he snapped. "I don't care if you're the damn president. You're getting out of this car." But the bluster didn't hide the crack forming in his armor. Amina could feel it. He was scared. Not of her. Of what she represented. Accountability. "I have complied fully," she said firmly, her words sharp as a blade. "You have no lawful reason to escalate this stop. Every second you continue is being documented and will be reported." The blinking red light glinted between them, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cole's breathing grew ragged. His hand hovered near his holster again, but this time it wasn't confidence pushing him. It was panic. For the first time that night, Amina allowed herself to believe what she clung to in the deepest part of her gut. She wasn't the one losing control. He was. And before the night was over, the whole world would know it. The night clenched tighter around them, suffocating and thick. Amina Rhodes watched as Officer Braden Cole's hand hovered ominously near his holster, fingers twitching like they had a mind of their own. The once blinding confidence he wore was now cracking, exposing not just fear, but something more dangerous, desperation. She sat perfectly still behind the wheel, the dashboard camera's blinking red light slicing through the darkness inside the SUV. A silent witness. A single pulse of truth against the chaotic churn of flashing patrol lights. The second white cop, Officer Davis, remained by their cruiser, silent and motionless, unsure whether to step in or step away. He saw it, too, the moment slipping out of control. Officer Cole's chest heaved with shallow breaths. His voice, when it came, was less a command and more a warning, ragged around the edges. "This is your last chance, ma'am," he said, the sarcasm on ma'am cutting like a blade. "Step out. Now." But Amina Rhodes, black woman, FBI Deputy Director, survivor, had survived storms fiercer than this. She had not risen to the ranks of the Bureau by yielding to bullies with guns and badges. She breathed in slowly, the scent of leather and cheap cologne filling her nose. Her voice stayed calm, crystalline, like a ripple across still water. "Without probable cause, you have no right to remove me from this vehicle, Officer Cole," she said. "You are escalating an unlawful stop." The words hit him harder than a slap. His face darkened. And then it happened. The movement she had seen in training videos, courtroom footage, security cam clips that played over and over in tragic loops. Officer Cole's hand slid down to his holster. A snap, a scrape of metal, and in a blink, the gun was drawn. Amina's world tunneled, narrowing to the cold glint of the weapon now pointed directly at her chest. The distance between them was barely 3 feet. Nothing at all. No time to duck. No time to reason. Only time to choose. Stay calm. Or die. Her muscles screamed to move, to protect herself, to survive by any means necessary. But she forced herself to stay still, fingers splayed openly against the steering wheel, her heart hammering so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. The white cops, the blinking lights, the neighbors peering through curtains, none of it mattered now. All that existed was a thin air between her and the barrel of that gun. Officer Cole's hands weren't steady. He was shaking. He was a white cop with a drawn weapon and a bruised ego, the most dangerous combination Mina knew. "Out of the SAR!" he screamed, voice cracking under the strain. The sound hit Amina like a physical blow. Her mouth went dry, her skin prickled with terror. But still she didn't move. Still, she didn't break. She met his eyes instead, eyes wide and furious, lost in the dangerous cocktail of bias and panic. "Officer Cole," she said, each word measured like a surgeon's incision. "You are pointing a loaded weapon at an unarmed citizen who has committed no crime." Her voice shook slightly now, but not from fear, from rage, from the sheer injustice crackling in the air around her. "I am Dr. Amina Rhodes," she said louder, sharper, Deputy Director of the FBI Cyber Division. And for a split second, the world seemed to tilt. Officer Cole blinked. The gun wavered. The mask of authority slipped, and for the first time, there was something raw in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. The truth she carried, her position, her power, cut through his fantasy of dominance like a blade. "You're lying," he hissed, but there was no conviction behind it, only dread. Amina inhaled slowly, steadying the tremor in her hands. "I am not," she said simply. "And your career, your freedom, maybe even your future, is hanging by the thread you're pulling tighter with that gun." The street around them remained frozen, the neighbors too terrified to intervene, the second officer too paralyzed to act. Only the camera recorded it all. The white cop with the gun, the black woman who refused to yield, the lines of power and fear drawn stark in the night. Officer Cole's mouth twisted, his finger twitching dangerously near the trigger. "You think you're above the law," he spat. "No," Amina replied, voice steady. "I am the law." And in that moment, something inside Cole broke. He jerked backward slightly, the gun lowering by inches. His breathing turned erratic. His control, like the brittle remains of his authority, crumbled. But he wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. "You're gonna regret this," he muttered again, weak now, almost pleading. Amina didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She stared him down, refusing to shrink, refusing to surrender an inch of ground, even as the weapon hovered between them like a loaded question. Somewhere in the distance, the faint wail of sirens began to cut through the night. Backup was coming. And this time, it wasn't for him. It was for her. The white cops shifted nervously, glancing over their shoulders at the approaching flashing lights. Officer Davis looked at Cole, then at Amina, uncertainty flooding his face. But Amina never took her eyes off the gun. Not until she saw it. The tiniest flicker of uncertainty crossing Officer Cole's features. Not until she knew the tide had turned, and she was still standing. The night air had become a living thing, thick and crackling with tension. Inside her SUV, Amina Rhodes felt every second stretching into eternity. Outside her window, Officer Braden Cole, a white cop whose anger had metastasized into fear, kept his gun aimed squarely at her chest. The blinking red light of her dashboard camera recorded it all. Every word, every flicker of rage, every betrayal of the badge he wore. Amina's hands remained on the wheel, her knuckles white, her breath a slow, deliberate rhythm against the rising storm. She had seen this before, not with herself, but in the broken bodies of others, in the grainy footage played on endless loops on evening news. Black men and women, stripped of dignity, reduced to hashtags and mourned in marches. And now here she was, the next name waiting to be written, unless she refused, unless she documented. You're gonna wish you'd stepped out when you had the chance. Officer Cole snarled, his voice shaking. He gripped the gun tighter, but the weapon betrayed him. It wavered, dipping slightly in the humid night air. He wasn't in control anymore. The black woman he had expected to fold, to shrink, to sob. She wasn't playing her part. Amina didn't blink, didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her chin, her voice threading through the heavy silence. "This entire encounter," she said, loud enough for the recording to catch every syllable, "is being filmed and broadcast in real time to secure a server." It wasn't a lie. The dashboard app was linked to Bureau protocols, a safeguard she'd insisted upon after too many close calls in the field. Officer Cole froze. A muscle jumped along his jaw. He knew what that meant. There was no erasing this. No accidental deletion. No fabricated report. To clean it up, his panic made him dangerous. More dangerous than before. "You think a little video is gonna save you?" he barked. "You think anyone cares about some black woman mouthing off during a traffic stop?" The venom in the words hit Amina square in the chest. Not because they were surprising, but because they were so devastatingly expected. The white cops, Officer Cole, Officer Davis, all of them, they had written the script long ago. In their minds, the black woman was always guilty, always threatening, always disposable. But tonight, their narrative was coming apart, and they knew it. "You're digging yourself deeper, Officer Cole," Amina said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "Every second you keep that weapon aimed at me without cause is another federal charge stacking up against you." Officer Davis, standing awkwardly by the patrol car, shifted his stance. The second white cop looked around, uneasy, as if realizing they were no longer operating under the cover of darkness, but under the searing light of accountability. Somewhere down the road, sirens grew louder. The cavalry was coming. Not for Cole. For her. Officer Cole stepped back half an inch, sweat glistening on his forehead. He wanted to end this. Wanted to walk away. Rewrite it. Undo the choices that had led him here. But pride is a heavy chain, and he was shackled to it. "You think your badge makes you better than me?" he spat. "You think being some FBI deputy, director, means you get special treatment?" Amina's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "No," she said, voice calm, slicing the night air. "I think it means I know exactly how many laws you're breaking right now." Another beat passed. The sirens were louder now, closer, flooding the street with the sound of inevitability. Officer Davis took a half step forward, uncertainty written all over his face. He wasn't siding with Cole anymore. He was trying to figure out how to distance himself before the explosion. And it was coming. The siren screamed. Tires screeched against asphalt. Lights flashed even brighter, bathing Elmwood Drive in a kaleidoscope of red, blue, and white. A convoy of black SUVs pulled in behind a patrol car, the Homeland Security insignia visible even from a distance. Federal agents poured out, fanning across the scene like a tide reclaiming its shoreline. Leading them was Special Agent Malik Sterling, tall, broad-shouldered, every step radiating command. The look in his eyes when he saw Officer Cole's gun still aimed at Amina's chest was enough to freeze the blood of anyone paying attention. Sterling didn't hesitate. He didn't shout. He didn't negotiate. He simply said, in a voice that carried across the entire block, "Officer Cole, lower your weapon. Now!" The two white cops froze. Cole's hand shook visibly, but he didn't lower the gun. Not yet. He turned his head slightly, confusion and stubbornness battling in his mind. "What is this?" he barked, but his voice cracked. "This is my stop, my jurisdiction." Sterling stepped closer, slow and measured, badge glinting in the patrol lights. "You're about 5 seconds away from committing a federal offense against a senior official," he said, deadly calm. "Lower your weapon." For a moment, no one breathed. The neighbors, the agents, even the cicadas had fallen silent. Only the blinking red light on Amina's dash cam flickered in the dark, recording every second, every decision. Officer Cole's hand faltered. The gun dipped, trembled, wavered between pride and survival. "You're bluffing," he whispered, but there was no strength behind it. Amina spoke then, her voice carrying an authority no gun could strip away. "I told you who I was," she said. "You didn't listen." The weight of those words and the dozen agents surrounding him finally cracked through Cole's stubbornness. Slowly, as if the act itself tore something loose inside him, Officer Cole lowered the weapon. It hung limply at his side. Sterling stepped forward. "Drop it," he ordered. The gun clattered to the ground. And with it, the illusion of power Officer Braden Cole had wrapped around himself shattered completely. The world, once frozen, roared back to life. Federal agents closed in. Handcuffs clicked. Cole's wrists twisted behind him. Amina closed her eyes for a moment. The first real breath she had allowed herself all night, filling her lungs. The black woman who refused to bow. The FBI deputy director who refused to break. She was still here, and her truth was undeniable. The cold metal of the night clanged in Amina Rhodes' mind long after the gun hit the pavement. Officer Braden Cole stood there, wrists locked in shaking fists, every fiber of him trembling, not with righteous anger now, but exposed fear. His illusion of control had shattered the moment the black SUVs arrived. The moment he realized a woman he had tried to bully at gunpoint wasn't just another face he could intimidate. She was the law. She was a black woman, and the FBI deputy director. And now, under the ruthless eye of the recording camera, the flashing lights and the hard stares of federal agents, there was nowhere for the white cops to hide. Amina's breath came steadier now. Not calm, not safe, but steady. Special Agent Malik Sterling moved fast, motioning his team into action. Officer Davis, the second white cop, was pulled aside and separated immediately. His compliance flimsy at best, his cowardice shining through in a way his hands shook when he handed over his weapon without resistance. But it was Cole who still tried to cling to the scraps of the authority he thought he possessed. "You can't do this," he barked, struggling against the agents holding him. "This is my stop." She resisted. The words tumbled from his mouth with frantic desperation, but they carried no weight. No one listened. Sterling faced him squarely, his voice a control force. "You pointed a loaded weapon at an unarmed citizen," he said, voice cutting through the night. "You escalated a peaceful encounter. You ignored lawful demands for probable cause. And you did it while the entire world watched." Cole's eyes darted wildly, seeking escape, seeking someone, anyone, who would validate him. But there was no one left. Not even Davis dared to meet his eyes. Across the road, porch lights blinked on. Neighbors peered from windows. Smartphones tilted upward, recording everything. Recording the night the white cops tried to crush a black woman at gunpoint and lost. Sterling stepped back and turned toward Amina's SUV, the agent's posture softening as he approached her window. "Deputy Director Rhodes," he said, using her title loud enough for everyone, including Cole, to hear. "Are you injured?" Amina slowly released her death grip on the steering wheel. Her muscles screamed in protest after holding so still for so long. "I'm fine," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed the aftershock still rippling through her. "You don't have to step out until you're ready," Sterling added, his words deliberate. "You are in control here." The phrase hit her harder than she expected. You are in control. 3 hours ago, she had left her office believing she was in control of her life, of her path. Then, within minutes, one white cop with a gun had tried to strip all that away. But he had failed. Amina unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out slowly into the harsh beam of the patrol car's headlights. Gravel crunched beneath her low heels. The cool night air kissed the sweat slicked against her skin. All around her, the scene was frozen in chaotic clarity. The SUVs of federal agents, the stunned white cops, but it was Officer Cole's expression she locked onto. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a threat, not as a suspect, but as a reckoning. Amina walked forward, each step reclaiming ground he'd tried to strip from her. She stopped just feet away from him, the flashing red lights illuminating the raw humiliation burning in his cheeks. "You never saw me," Amina said quietly, so only he and a few agents could hear. "You saw a car you didn't think I should be driving. You saw a neighborhood you didn't think I should belong to. You didn't see a citizen. You didn't see a deputy director. You didn't see a person. Cole flinched like the words had struck him harder than handcuffs. "You saw a black woman," Amina continued, voice unshakable, "and you thought you were the law." She leaned in slightly, meeting him eye to eye, unafraid, unflinching. "But I am the law." The silence between them roared louder than any siren. Cole's mouth opened, maybe to protest, maybe to beg, but no words came. What excuse could fit inside the chasm of what he had done? Sterling gave a slight nod to the agents beside him. They pulled Cole away, leading him toward one of the black SUVs now repurposed as a mobile holding cell. As he stumbled past, Amina saw it, the death of a certainty. The realization that no amount of arrogance or badge-waving would undo the truth. The white cops had been caught, on tape, in public, without the shield of silence they usually relied on. Amina turned toward Sterling. "I want every second of the footage preserved," she said, her voice crisp. "No edits. No gaps." "Already ordered," he replied, matching her tone. "You'll have a full federal investigation open by sunrise." Amina nodded once tight, already feeling the exhaustion anchoring itself deep in her bones. This wasn't over. Not even close. Tonight, she had survived. But survival wasn't justice. Justice required more. Demanded a reckoning not just for her, but for every voice that never had the chance to speak back. As she stood there under the blinking patrol lights, Amina Rhodes, black woman, FBI deputy director, realized something else. She wasn't just part of the system anymore. She was coming for it. And this time, the camera was rolling. The night that had threatened to bury Amina Rhodes instead became the night that revealed everything. Within hours of Officer Braden Cole's arrest, the footage from her dashboard camera had been encrypted, uploaded, and disseminated to the proper federal channels. By dawn, it wasn't just government officials who were watching it. It was the world. Every chilling second of the standoff was there. The white cops towering over her. The threats. The drawn weapon. The trembling barrel of the gun pointed at a black woman who had done nothing wrong, except exist where their bias said she didn't belong. And then the reveal. "I am Deputy Director Amina Rhodes, FBI Cyber Division." Those words, simple yet thunderous, spread across news outlets like wildfire. They were played on cable news, looped on social media feeds, dissected by legal experts, demanded by activists. They weren't just a personal declaration. They were an indictment. An indictment of a system where a white cop could aim a loaded gun at a black woman for the crime of confidence, of presence, of dignity. By noon, hashtag Deputy Director Rhodes trended worldwide. Alongside it, hashtag white cops, hashtag black woman survives, hashtag end the law, hashtag FBI Deputy Director. The truth was no longer contained in the grainy dashcam footage. It was stitched into the collective consciousness of a nation already fraying under the weight of its own unresolved injustices. At FBI headquarters, a crisis meeting was underway. Amina sat at the long, gleaming mahogany table, her back straight despite the exhaustion eating at the edges of her mind. Across from her, Director Olivia Masters tapped a pen against a notepad, her face set in stone. "You understand," Masters said evenly. "This isn't just about you, Amina. It's about the entire Bureau." Amina nodded once. "It's about the entire country." There was a long silence, heavy with implications. Masters sighed, dropping the pen onto the table. "The Attorney General wants a public statement," she continued. "You're a hero in her eyes right now, but this is volatile, very volatile." "I'm not interested in being a symbol," Amina said, her voice firm but controlled. "I'm interested in change." Masters studied her for a long moment, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. "You'll have to be careful," the director finally said. "The white cops involved will be prosecuted, but we can't control the backlash." Amina almost laughed, a sharp, bitter sound she barely caught before escaped. Careful. It was always about being careful. Careful not to anger the wrong people. Careful not to demand too much. Careful not to exist too loudly. "No," Amina said, standing. "I've been careful my whole life. Careful didn't stop that gun from being pointed at my chest. Careful didn't save Sandra Bland, or Breonna Taylor, or..." She stopped herself. The room was too sterile for mourning, too small for the fire roaring inside her. "I'll give my statement," Amina said, "but I won't dilute the truth." Masters inclined her head slightly, not approval, not agreement, just acknowledgement. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Later that evening, Amina stood before a sea of reporters gathered outside the Department of Justice. Camera flashes exploded like tiny firecrackers. Microphones bristled toward her like a field of thorns. She wore her bureau suit, dark, sharp, authoritative. But she didn't need a uniform to command the crowd. She had earned every inch of authority through fire. She gripped the edges of the podium, steadying herself, then began. "My name is Dr. Amina Rhodes. I am the Deputy Director of the FBI Cyber Division, and I am a black woman in America." The words, spoken in that even, steady tone, rolled over the crowd like a shockwave. "Last night, while returning to my home in Easton, Maryland, I was unlawfully stopped by 2 white cops. I was treated not as a citizen, not as a federal official, but as a threat because of the color of my skin." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My adherence to the law, my patience, my restraint, none of it protected me. "What protected me," she said, pausing, letting the weight of the moment settle, "was the camera recording every second, and the truth that I refused to surrender." Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras whirred. Some agents on the sidelines stood a little taller, pride flickering across their faces. "I am grateful to be alive," Amina continued, "but survival is not justice. Survival is not reform. Survival is not enough." Her voice sharpened, carrying across the cold marble steps. "This cannot be another moment we forget. This must be a catalyst for real reform, for real accountability, for real change." The crowd broke into a low, rolling murmur of agreement. Amina didn't blink. She had seen too much to believe that a speech alone could heal a nation, but it could be a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings matter more than anyone wanted to admit. That night, alone in her apartment, Amina watched the replay of her own speech on the news. She saw herself, standing tall against the tide of a system designed to swallow women like her whole. And for the first time in days, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. This wasn't victory. It was survival. It was truth. And it was just the beginning. The white cops thought they could erase her dignity with the cock of a gun. They thought they could erase her humanity with a badge and a barked order. They were wrong. The world had seen. The world had listened. And now, the black woman they had tried to silence was leading the charge to rewrite the rules entirely. One law at a time. One voice at a time. Starting with her own. The night Amina Rhodes stood her ground was already transforming into legend. Across social media, TV broadcasts, and newspaper headlines, the world couldn't look away. The footage of a black woman, poised and defiant against the trembling barrel of a white cop's gun, replayed endlessly. Every frame, every word she uttered, especially the searing reveal of her true identity as the FBI Deputy Director, was burned into public consciousness. And it wasn't just the civilians watching now. Inside the towering glass headquarters of the FBI in Washington, D.C., inside the steely halls of Homeland Security, inside war rooms lined with monitors at Justice Department command centers, Amina's name was on every agenda. Deputy Director Amina Rhodes, targeted at gunpoint by white cops, alive and fighting back. The official federal response came faster than Amina had anticipated. 2 nights after the incident, the convoy rolled through Easton, Maryland. Again, this time, it wasn't patrol cars and isolated authority. It was a wave. 10 black SUVs, their engines a low thunder against the cobbled streets, pulled up outside the Easton Police Department. The town's sleepy courthouse square, usually dotted with farmers markets and coffee stands, now buzzed with tension. Reporters flanked the sidewalks, cameras ready. Locals peeked out from shop windows, whispering anxiously. They knew something big was about to happen. Inside the police department, Officer Braden Cole sat handcuffed in a stark interview room, sweat beading along his temples. The footage was undeniable. His actions were indefensible. And now, the consequences were barreling toward him. The door swung open. Leading the charge was Special Agent Malik Sterling, his Homeland Security credentials flashing under the fluorescent lights. Behind him, a wall of federal agents moved with purpose, each bearing the full weight of government authority. Officer Davis, the second white cop from that night, sat rigid behind a desk. His face, ghostly pale, said everything. He knew they were here not just for Cole. They were here for the entire Rotten Root system. Sterling's voice cut through the building like a blade. "Officer Braden Cole," he said sharply, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You are under federal arrest for the unlawful detention, intimidation, and armed threat against Deputy Director Amina Rhodes, a senior federal official." Cole's mouth opened, desperate to object, but no words came. Sterling didn't wait. Two agents moved in, reading Cole his rights with cold precision, cuffing him tighter, securing him as a swarm of cameras captured his humiliation outside. The entire town would see it. The nation would see it. The world would see it. Outside, under the blinding press lights, Amina Rhodes stood tall in the warm evening breeze. She wore a simple dark blazer, the FBI deputy director's badge visible against her chest. Her posture was steady, every inch of her radiating the truth she had refused to let Cole erase. Reporters shouted questions. "Deputy Director Rhodes, are you pressing charges personally? How widespread is racial profiling in Easton's department? What reforms are you demanding?" Amina raised her hand, and the crowd hushed. "I'm not here today as just a survivor," she said, her voice ringing clear against the courthouse walls. "I'm here as a witness to a larger problem. The actions of the white cops that night didn't happen in isolation. They are symptoms of a system that must be confronted, dismantled, and rebuilt." A murmur of agreement rippled through the journalists, through the agents standing behind her. Amina continued, "This isn't just about Officer Cole. This is about every black woman who has been stopped without cause. Every black woman who has been silenced, threatened, minimized. And it's about holding those accountable who believe a badge gives them the right to terrorize rather than to protect." The weight of her words pressed against the hearts of everyone listening. Across the square, Sterling escorted Cole, now flanked by federal agents, into one of the waiting SUVs. Cameras captured every shameful step, from the moment Cole's eyes dropped to the pavement to the clinking of the handcuffs against his belt. Amina turned slightly, watching him. For a brief second, their eyes locked. Cole's face twisted in something between anger and despair. Amina didn't look away. She had survived him, and now she would outlast him, because unlike him, her authority wasn't built on fear. It was built on truth. Back at FBI headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Amina stepped into a briefing room buzzing with agents and legal teams. On the giant monitor screen at the front, live news coverage showed images of Cole's arrest, juxtaposed with footage of her standing tall at the podium. Sterling joined her, offering a respectful nod. "Justice," he said simply. Amina allowed herself a brief, weary smile. "Justice is a process, not a moment." He nodded again, understanding. "First steps," he agreed. At the center of the room, an array of documents detailed sweeping plans. Federal investigations into local police departments. Proposed legislation for mandatory body cameras. Drafts for civilian oversight committees. Her name was at the top of every initiative, not as a victim. As a leader, the black woman they had tried to silence was now helping to rewrite the law they had twisted. Amina looked around the room, agents who respected her, officials who finally understood the stakes. She thought about the countless lives who wouldn't get the national coverage she did, the names who were hashtags before they could ever speak their truth. She carried them with her now, in every word, in every law, in every breath. That night, alone in her apartment, Amina watched the convoy footage replay on her phone. She watched Officer Cole being loaded into a federal SUV. She watched the flashing lights fade into the distance, and she let herself cry, not from weakness, but from the raw, searing knowledge that the battle had only begun. She wasn't naive. The system didn't fall with the arrest of one white cop, but the world had seen the truth now. A black woman, an FBI deputy director, refusing to yield, refusing to disappear. And if they thought they could silence her, they hadn't been listening at all. The reinforcements had arrived, and this time they were just getting started. Officer Braden Cole sat alone in the holding cell at the Federal Detention Center, his world collapsing in slow, agonizing layers. The sterile walls seemed to close in around him, the flickering fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a mocking reminder of everything he had lost. Not just his badge, not just his reputation. His entire illusion of untouchable power had shattered, all because a black woman had refused to bow. Deputy Director Amina Rhodes. The name haunted him now, echoing in every breath, every heartbeat. He had thought he could intimidate her, control her, reduce her to just another traffic stop statistic. He hadn't seen a woman who had built her life brick by brick, battle by battle, through a system that was never built for her. He had only seen his own fear, reflected back in her refusal to cower. And now, the consequences were crashing down. Inside the grand marble halls of the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, the trial of Officer Braden Cole drew a crowd like few had before. The media dubbed it the standoff trial. Civil rights leaders, federal officials, and everyday citizens packed the gallery. Some came to witness justice. Others came to see if it would slip through their fingers once again. At the prosecution table, Amina Rhodes sat with composed gravity, dressed in a simple navy suit, her hands folded neatly on the polished wood before her, her badge tucked securely into her jacket pocket. She wasn't here for spectacle. She was here for truth. The proceedings began with a sharp rap of the judge's gavel. All rise. The bailiff commanded and the room obeyed. Judge Elias Monroe, a man known for his steely commitment of fairness, presided over the case. His deep-set eyes scanned the courtroom, landing briefly on Amina before turning to the fence table where Cole sat. No badge, no weapon, just a crumpled suit and a clenched jaw. The prosecution wasted no time. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Lynn rose, her voice steady but piercing. "We are here today," she began, "because a sworn officer of the law violated the very principles he was sworn to protect. We will show you without doubt that Officer Braden Cole unlawfully detained and threatened a citizen, a black woman, at gunpoint, escalated a routine encounter into a near tragedy." She let the words hang for a moment before continuing. And when that citizen revealed herself to be the deputy director of the FBI, his actions didn't change, because his perception of her humanity had already been decided long before her title was spoken. The jury, a cross-section of Easton's community, sat stone-faced, absorbing every syllable. Across the room, Cole's defense attorney rose, his argument heavy with tired tropes. Officer Cole was acting under stress. He perceived a threat. He had seconds to make a decision. But the words fell hollow, because this time, the world had seen the tape, and no amount of spin could twist what was recorded. The calm demeanor of a black woman, the escalating aggression of a white cop, the gun aimed at a heart that had done nothing but exist in the wrong color skin. When it was her turn to testify, Amina stood slowly, every step to the witness stand a reclamation of ground once threatened to be stolen from her. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and turned to face the courtroom. "Please state your name and occupation," Lynn prompted. "Amina Rhodes," she said, her voice clear, "Deputy Director, FBI Cyber Division." There was the title Officer Cole had tried to erase. Lynn moved carefully through her questions. "Deputy Director Rhodes, can you describe the events of the night in question?" Amina nodded, every word measured, but every syllable infused with a fire of memory. "I followed every traffic law," she said. "I signaled every turn. I drove under the speed limit. Despite that, I was pulled over without cause. When I respectfully asked for the reason, I was met with hostility. When I asserted my rights, I was threatened with firearm." The jury leaned in, eyes wide. "And during this encounter, Deputy Director," Lynn continued, "did you ever resist arrest, make sudden movements, or act aggressively?" "No," Amina said firmly. "I remained visible at all times. I announced my actions. I complied. I only requested that proper legal procedures be followed." The prosecutor nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the court. No further questions. The defense attempted to poke holes in her testimony. Deputy Director Rhodes. Cole's lawyer sneered. Could it be possible that Officer Cole perceived your refusal to exit the vehicle as a threat to his safety? Amina's eyes didn't waver. Exercising my constitutional rights is not a threat, she said. It is the foundation of this country. Officer Cole's perception was based on bias, not danger. The courtroom stilled. It was a truth too raw to deny. In closing arguments, Lynn stood before the jury and laid the case bare. This trial isn't about how hard law enforcement's job is. We respect that. This trial is about accountability. It's about a white cop who abuses power against a black woman who dared to ask for the law to be followed. It's about whether justice is only for some or for all. She pointed to the screen where the footage played one last time. You saw the truth. Now you must decide what it means. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, candles lit, posters raised. Justice for Amina. Protect black women. Accountability now. When the jury returned, the air inside the courtroom was so thick it felt almost solid. The foreman rose. We find the defendant guilty on all charges. A collective exhale rippled through the room. Cole slumped in his chair, pale and shaking. Judge Monroe's voice carried over the murmurs. Officer Braden Cole, you are hereby sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole, and barred from ever serving in law enforcement again. The gavel slammed down. Final, official, irrevocable. Amina sat there, hands folded once again, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. It wasn't the end of the fight. It wasn't the end of injustice. But it was a reckoning, a beginning, as she rose from her seat, locking eyes with the spectators. Some with tears in her eyes, others with fists raised in silent solidarity. She felt it deep inside. The fall of Officer Cole wasn't just about one man's punishment. It was about every black woman who had been told she didn't belong. It was about every white cop who thought their badge was a license to dominate rather than to protect. And it was about a future that, for the first time in a long time, felt possible. Because Amina Rhodes had not been silenced. She had spoken, and the world had heard. Loud, clear, unbreakable. The verdict rippled across America like a lightning strike. News stations cut into regular programming to announce it. Pundits, activists, and legal scholars flooded the airwaves. Social media exploded in real time. White cops threaten black women at gunpoint. FBI deputy director fights back and wins. In living rooms, barbershops, school cafeterias, and courtrooms across the country, people watch the footage of Officer Braden Cole's fall, over and over again. Not a dramatization, not a reenactment. The raw, unflinching truth. A black woman sitting calmly behind the wheel. A white cop trembling with anger and fear, weapon drawn. The moment her voice sliced the night open. I am Deputy Director Amina Rhodes, FBI Cyber Division. It was more than just a revelation. It was a revolution caught on tape. That night, Amina Rhodes sat alone in her apartment, staring out over the city skyline of Washington, D.C. The glow of the Capitol dome blinked in the distance, a symbol of democracy's promise and all its failures. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the coffee table beside her. Messages poured in. Senators, civil rights leaders, victims' families, strangers who saw themselves in her fight. You give me hope. You made us visible. You made them see. The words filled her chest with something unfamiliar, something heavier than pride but lighter than grief. Not joy, not triumph, something deeper, responsibility. The victory wasn't hers alone. It belonged to every black woman who had driven down a dark road and wondered if they would make it home. It belonged to every mother who had to talk with her child, not about dreams but about survival. And now, the world was watching her next move, not as a victim, as a leader. The next morning, Amina walked into the National Press Club, greeted by a wall of reporters and flashing cameras. The moment she stepped onto stage, the room fell into a hush. No teleprompters, no scripted sound bites, just her and the truth. She adjusted the microphone, her reflection caught in the gleaming metal. a black woman who had faced death without blinking and demanded the world do the same. "My name," she began, her voice low but resonant, "is Dr. Amina Rhodes. I am the Deputy Director of the FBI Cyber Division. And like so many others, I am a survivor of a system built to diminish me." A ripple moved through the room. "I am not unique because I held my ground," she continued. "I am not unique because I survived. What makes this moment different is that it was recorded, and because of that, it could not be erased." She paused, letting the weight settle. But too many others were not so lucky. Too many black women were stopped, silenced, erased before they could say their name, let alone their title. Her voice broke slightly, just enough to reveal the depth of the wound. "And so today, I stand not for myself, but for them, for the ones who didn't get cameras, for the ones who didn't get headlines, for the ones whose justice was delayed or denied entirely." The crowd leaned in. No one blinked. No one breathed. "I vow," Amina said, her voice rise like crescendo, "to use every ounce of my position, every inch of my platform, to fight for a system where survival is no longer the highest aspiration, where dignity, respect, and fairness are the norm, not the exception." Flashes erupted. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Amina leaned closer to the microphone. "This is not about one white cop and one black woman. It's about dismantling a culture of fear and arrogance that infects too many of our institutions." She smiled grimly, fiercely. "And to those who still cling to that culture, I have only this to say. You will be seen, you will be challenged, and you will be changed." Thunderous applause erupted, rising like a tidal wave. In that moment, Amina Rhodes was no longer just a deputy director. She was a symbol, a catalyst, the embodiment of a future that refused to die quietly. Over the next days, legislation moved faster than anyone expected. Congressional hearings were scheduled. New federal guidelines for traffic stops were introduced. Funding for independent civilian oversight boards was fast-tracked. The words Deputy Director Amina Rhodes appeared in bill titles, official statements, policy reforms. She testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, her voice unwavering. She met with grieving families of victims whose names have become hashtags and war cries. She sat in small church basements and massive union halls, listening to stories that broke her heart and fueled her fire. She didn't sleep much. She didn't rest, but she fought, because she knew something few others dared to believe. The fall of Officer Cole wasn't a full victory. It was just the opening salvo. The real battle for systemic change was still raging, and she would be on the front lines every step of the way. Late one evening, as she prepared for yet another hearing, Amina paused by her window, looking down at the bustling streets below. She thought about how close she had come to becoming another statistic, another name mourned instead of celebrated. The reality gnawed at her, but so did something else. Hope, because now a black woman, an FBI deputy director, had forced America to confront itself, not with rage, not with vengeance, but with truth. And the nation was still watching, waiting, daring her to keep fighting. Amina Rhodes took a deep breath, rolled her shoulders back, and stepped once more into the fire, because she knew justice wasn't a single courtroom verdict. Justice was a lifetime commitment, and she was ready for all of it. Months passed, but the night on Elmwood Drive never left Amina Rhodes. It lingered, not just in headlines or congressional hearings, but in the quiet moments, the pauses between breaths, the silence before sleep, the reflexive tightening of her hands on the steering wheel every time she saw flashing lights in the distance. But Amina was not the same woman who had been forced to stare down the barrel of Officer Cole's gun. She was something more now, sharpened, tempered, unbreakable, because out of terror, she had planted seeds. And now, across the nation, they were beginning to grow. The first real proof came with the signing of the Federal Traffic Equity Act in the grand rotunda of the Capitol. Surrounded by families of victims and champions of justice, the president put pen to paper. Body cameras, mandatory. Independent civilian oversight boards, funded. Federal review of racially biased stops, law. At the ceremony, The cameras turned naturally to Amina. She didn't step forward. She didn't need to. Her presence, her fight, her survival had already reshaped the law. The media dubbed it the Rhodes Standard. A black woman, an FBI deputy director, changing history with truth instead of bullets. But legislative victories were only part of the battle. The deeper work, the real change, took root in communities. In Easton, Maryland, where the nightmare had begun, a different kind of ripple effect stirred. The police department, once cloaked in silence and denial, underwent a sweeping overhaul. Officer training programs were rewritten. Diversity initiatives expanded. Leadership changed not by quiet resignation, but by public accountability. Amina returned there once, months after the trial. No cameras, no speeches, just her, standing outside the courthouse where Braden Cole had been sentenced, watching families stroll safely by. Mothers, daughters, young black girls whose world might now tilt slightly more in their favor. She didn't need applause. The change, however small, was her reward. One rainy afternoon, Amina sat at a community roundtable in Baltimore, flanked by activists, teachers, and teenagers too young to vote, but already too wise for their years. A young girl, no older than 14, raised her hand timidly. "Deputy Director Rhodes," she asked, voice trembling, "how did you stay calm that night when he pointed the gun at you?" The room fell painfully still. Amina leaned forward, meeting the girl's wide, searching eyes. "I wasn't calm," she said softly. "I was terrified. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing firm in the middle of it." She paused, letting the words settle. "I stayed calm because I wasn't just surviving for myself. I was surviving for everyone who might never get a second chance." The girl nodded slowly, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. And right there, without laws, without speeches, change happened again, one heart at a time. The scars, however, remained. There were nights when Amina would wake in a cold sweat, her mind replaying the flash of Cole's gun, the sneer in his voice when he said, "You're out of place." But she refused to let the fear define her. Instead, she used it. At law schools, she lectured on constitutional rights and racial profiling. At FBI training academies, she restructured protocols, making sure agents understood that protecting citizens meant all citizens, not just the ones who look like them. At community forums, she listened more than she spoke, letting the people most affected by injustice shape the reforms bearing her name. White cops, black woman, FBI deputy director. Those words were once a flashpoint. Now, they were a catalyst. One evening, long after the noise had faded, Amina returned to Elmwood Drive. She parked her car, a different one now, by the same stretch of road where the world had changed. The crickets chirped softly. Streetlights buzzed overhead. The asphalt, wet from a passing rain, reflected the glow of distant headlights. She sat there for a long moment, hands loose on the wheel, breathing, remembering, honoring, not the fear, not the violence, but the choice she had made to stand firm, to survive, and to fight. A patrol car rolled past slowly, the officer inside giving a cautious nod. No sirens, no flash of red and blue, just acknowledgement. A tiny, almost invisible victory. Amina smiled faintly, feeling the weight of 1,000 unseen battles carried on her shoulders, and knowing she was not alone. She thought about all the unseen black women who had come before her, who had fought and bled, and hoped for a day like this. A day when they would not be silenced, when they would write the laws, when they would protect their own future. Amina started her engine, the quiet purr filling the night. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a road, winding, brutal, endless. And Amina Rhodes, deputy director, black woman, survivor, warrior, would keep walking it. For those who couldn't, for those who could, for those yet to come. Because the seeds of change were no longer buried. They were sprouting. And Amina was determined to make sure they grew tall enough to touch the sky. If this story moved you, if it sparked something deep inside you, don't let it end here. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that remind us Courage, justice, and truth are worth fighting for. Your voice, your support, your presence, they make a difference. Stay with us. The next story could be the one that changes everything.